Mina arrived at the cathedral on a night thick with storm clouds, drawn by a fascination she could neither deny nor fully understand. She had first heard tales of the place from her grandmother, who spun half-whispered legends about a grand building perched at the cliff's edge, a building said to harbor watchful eyes carved from stone. The older woman's voice had quaked as she spoke of howling winds and a deafening thunder that reverberated off the crumbling walls. The place was rumored to have been long abandoned, yet many swore they heard the echo of chanting choirs late at night. As Mina stepped off the narrow path onto the loose gravel surrounding the courtyard, she felt an intangible chill, not merely cold from the wind, but something older, something that bore the taint of centuries. Lightning hurled itself across the sky, illuminating towering spires and broken gargoyles in jarring flashes. The silent hush that lingered between thunderclaps felt like an intake of breath before a terrifying cry. She found her way into the cathedral through a door so warped that it hardly fit its ancient frame. The door let out a wail of protest, almost human in its keening pitch. Inside, the air felt even heavier. Dampness clung to the high stone walls, and ivy tendrils sprang from cracks, entwining themselves around columns and arches. Her footsteps echoed in subdued repetition, as though the building devoured sound. Everything here was lost to ruin. Most of the wooden pews had collapsed into piles of rot, and the banners that once depicted the sainted stories of old had disintegrated into threads. Yet she perceived a lingering grandeur behind the decay, an indelible testament to an era when reverent footsteps once resounded across polished floor. She hesitated in the nave, holding her breath as she tried to make sense of the echoes. From somewhere above came a faint fluttering noise, as if large wings unfurled in the rafters. Another flash of lightning lit up the space behind her, and for an instant the cathedral seemed fully visible in stark monochrome. Arches soared overhead like the ribs of some gigantic beast. The windows were jagged eyes, open to the swirling tempest outside. At first she thought she caught movement up near the clerestory windows, a shifting silhouette that vanished as soon as she looked directly at it. Her pulse hammered. Exhausted by the tension, she shook her head and tried to reassure herself that wind through cracked stones can sometimes produce illusions. She repeated this silently, hoping her trembling limbs would steady. Despite her lingering apprehension, she pressed forward, stepping ever deeper into the nave. Each step echoed with a strange resonance, magnified by the labyrinth of corridors and hidden chapels that branched off into darkness. She carried only a sputtering lantern, and its flickering light seemed dwarfed by the crushing immensity of the cathedral's gloom. Shadows stretched out in elongated shapes across ancient carvings. Stone angels and grotesque creatures lined the walls, once the pride of medieval artisans. Her gaze followed the line of sculpted faces, each contorted in an unearthly expression, a testament to some archaic imagination. Mina felt like these sculptures were watching her climb the dais leading to the altar, their cold eyes following her every move. The heart of the cathedral was dominated by a massive rosette window that should have dazzled with stained glass colors, but centuries had not been kind to it. Jagged shards of glass clung feebly to the lead framework, their once bright hues subdued under a film of dust and salt spray from the ocean below. Lightning struck beyond the cliffs, briefly illuminating the rosette like a dull, fractured moon. The thunder that followed made the stone altar tremble. She noticed something behind the altar, a locked metal gate that led to a spiral staircase. The gate stood ajar by inches, as if inviting the curious to venture up. A sense of foreboding warred with her inquisitive nature. Stories told of dreadful secrets that lived in the upper chambers, said to be sealed off for good reason. Summoning her courage, Mina pushed past the gate, which rasped over the worn floor. The spiral staircase coiled upward in narrow stone steps, and each footfall sent bits of debris tumbling into the darkness below her. She counted the steps. It gave her mind something to latch onto. At the 38th, she emerged into a small circular landing. Here, narrow windows let in slivers of the storm's sputtering light. The walls were adorned with carvings so detailed that each line of the chisel remained visible, scenes of battles between angels and demons. Their wings spread wide in a celestial combat. Gargoyles peered down from the corners, their expressions forever frozen in twisted sneer. She shuddered at the uncanny realism in their faces. Each gaping maw seemed poised to emit a silent shriek. The wind outside lashed against the stone, and with it came the persistent impression of wings beating, flapping, circling above. She continued upward, guided by morbid fascination, as well as an odd sense of having come too far to turn back. Occasionally, thunder shook the structure so powerfully that she gripped the wall for support. At last, she reached the topmost floor, a gallery that overlooked the nave from a dizzying height. The pews below looked like broken teeth in a giant mouth. Another flash of lightning revealed a row of gargoyle statues perched along the edge of the gallery. Only now did she realize just how massive these figures were. Each had a menacing visage and sweeping wings carved with the detail of feathers. Though they were made of solid stone, moss and lichens splotched their bodies, giving them an almost living texture. She could have sworn she saw one shift, as if adjusting its weight from one talon to another. She froze. The flicker of perception ended almost as soon as it began. When the next bolt of lightning tore through the sky, all gargoyles were once again stationary. Heart pounding in her throat, Mina approached them, breath shallow. She raised her lantern to scrutinize one of the monstrous faces. The mouth was parted slightly, revealing jagged stone fangs. Its eyes were empty sockets of polished basalt. She felt a compulsion to step closer. Lightning flashed outside as if to warn her away, but she pressed on. Her hand hovered over the gargoyle's snout. The stone felt deceptively warm, possibly from the friction of hot, storm-charged air. Then, without warning, thunder clapped so loudly it seemed the walls would crumble. She jumped back, nearly dropping the lantern. As if in response to that peal, something within the cathedral responded with a deep rumbling that did not come from the storm. Slow and grinding, it sounded like ancient joints protesting after centuries of stillness. She repeatedly told herself it was the wind, that the top of such an old building was bound to shift under the onslaught of gale-force gusts. But each time the thunder boomed, she heard the resonance beneath it, echoing back like a monstrous heartbeat. And with each echo, the gargoyles seemed different. Imperceptibly, they looked more animated. The storm grew fiercer, the sky illuminated by near-constant lightning. Fierce gusts forced salt-laced rain in through the broken windows, drenching the stone floors. Water glistened along the edges of the gargoyles' wings, making them gleam. Mina backed away, unsettled by the notion that their wings might truly be stirring. The entire gallery shook when lightning struck somewhere close to the cliff, causing a tremor so strong she had to brace herself against a column. In that brittle moment of searing brightness, she saw the gargoyles stretch their rigid limbs in a ballet of impossible motion. She closed her eyes, unsure whether it was a trick of the storm's light, but when she opened them again, she found the creatures turned toward her, stone heads tilted in unnatural curiosity. A deafening crash shook the cathedral. The rosette window below exploded inwards under the relentless wind, and shards of glass rained onto the nave floor. The shriek of the storm surged into the space with renewed vigor, swirling in hideous gusts that rattled the rafters. It felt like the entire building was exhaling centuries of pent-up frustration. Through the broken window, a fork of lightning revealed the precipice where waves battered the rocky base. In the same flash, Mina witnessed one of the gargoyles on the gallery's edge. Its claws gripped the parapet. Muscles tensed. It looked ready to spring. Her lantern flickered violently, and for a heartbeat, she saw the gargoyle's stone eyelids lift, revealing dull red orbs beneath. A scream lodged in her throat, refusing to break free. Something primal took over. She stumbled backward, unable to look away from the unfolding nightmare. One by one, the gargoyles began to move, stretching massive wings cracked by time and weather. Their stone joints made an ear-splitting sound, like boulders grinding against each other. The largest of them, perched nearest the battered opening, released a feral roar that issued not from flesh, but from the depths of ancient magic. It reverberated along the cathedral walls, shaking loose bits of masonry that fell in dusty showers. Another creature dropped from its post on the gallery, plummeting toward the nave below. Mina gasped, expecting it to shatter on impact, but instead its wings snapped open, catching an updraft of wind. It swooped in a wide arc, mouth agape in silent menace. Panic threatened to paralyze her, but she forced herself to move, her pulse hammering in her extremities. She pivoted and sprinted toward the spiral staircase, each gasp a ragged testament to her fear. Behind her, she heard another monstrous grinding as yet more gargoyles launched themselves from the gallery. Their wing beats filled the cavernous space, a swirl of thunder and ancient stone come to life. She hurled herself down the twisting stairs, struggling not to trip in her haste. Her lantern guttered with each jolt, but she clung to it as if it were her only lifeline in the oppressive darkness. When she reached the locked metal gate, she discovered it twisted and bent. Something had forced its way through. Overhead, a gargoyle's roar shook her entire being. She yanked on the gate. It screeched in protest, then gave way. She bolted past the altar, her feet sliding on shards of broken glass. The storm's fury whipped through the cathedral, blowing out her lantern entirely, leaving her in near-total darkness. The occasional lightning flashes were now her only source of illumination. In one such flash, she caught sight of a gargoyle perched on a shattered pillar near the center of the nave. It turned its head toward her, jagged mouth parting in silent, hungry intent as water streamed over its stony hide and its wings twitched in readiness. Her only chance was to get out, to brave the storm outside rather than remain trapped in this monstrous menagerie. She sprinted down what remained of the central aisle. Thunder growled in the distance, rolling overhead and across the battered ocean. Another flash revealed the cathedral's massive doors, still warped in their frames, now rattling in the wind like a living thing. Behind her came the scrape of claws on stone, too close for comfort. She refused to glance back, fearing that one look would root her to the spot. With every ounce of strength, she pushed at the heavy door. It resisted, weighed down by centuries of neglect and the unrelenting gusts from outside. She gave another shove, and it budged just enough for her to slip through. Outside, the wind buffeted her, nearly throwing her off her feet. Rain pelted so harshly that it felt like needles across her skin. The courtyard was slick with mud and strewn with blocks of fallen masonry. Lightning slashed across the sky, lighting the courtyard in a strobe of violent white. In that stark moment, she saw the gargoyles emerging from the cathedral's broken windows and balconies, wings flaring against the gloom. They soared above the spires, silhouettes of impossible nightmares backlit by the tempest. Some perched along the roof's edge, scanning the world below with stone eyes that seemed to burn. Others took to the air, circling the ruined cathedral in a ghastly dance. Mina plunged forward, the jagged path leading away from the cathedral all but obliterated by sliding rubble. Her clothing clung to her, waterlogged and cold. The salt-laden wind stung her nose and eyes. She had to reach the edge of the courtyard and find the narrow trail that wound down toward the safer inland road. Even in the blackest night, that path offered the only route away from the cliff. She clambered over a fallen statue, a knight whose head had broken off, leaving behind a weather-worn torso. Lightning once again illuminated the dreadful scene. She found the path at last, only to discover a chunk of the cliff had collapsed, leaving a precarious gap. Behind her came another roar, but this one was less bestial, more like a deep moaning of stone. Looking over her shoulder, she realized the grand cathedral was suffering under the onslaught of the storm and the awakened gargoyles. Parts of the towers were crumbling, tumbling into the sea below in an avalanche of debris, and the gargoyles, instead of fleeing, circled around the structure as if it were a piece of sacred territory they would guard until their final breath. The thunder boomed incessantly, merging with the hiss and spit of the ocean, forming a symphony of doom. She balanced on the slippery stones at the cliff's edge, testing if the footing was stable enough to cross. Pebbles clattered into the darkness as they rolled off the brink. Dare she risk a fall onto the jagged rocks far below? A flash of lightning revealed a gap of several feet over a void of blackness. Her pulse hammered. She heard a guttural hiss overhead. One gargoyle had followed her out, perched on a broken column at the edge of the courtyard. Its stony form was half obscured by sheets of rain, but she could make out its wings tucked in, its tail thrashing in agitation. It lowered its head, as though readying to pounce. Summoning every shred of courage, she willed herself to leap. Her body lurched through the air, and for an excruciating moment she felt weightless, suspended over an endless fall. Her stomach clenched in terror as her feet hit the slick rocks on the other side. She stumbled, nearly sliding backwards off the cliff. With a desperate lunge, she grabbed a protruding root to steady herself. The gargoyle leapt after her, but part of the cathedral's collapsed rubble gave way beneath its weight. With a thunderous crash, the stone creature tumbled, wings flailing in a half-formed attempt at flight. It smashed onto a rocky outcrop below, exploding into countless shards that fell into the raging sea. Gasping for breath, Mina steadied herself as best she could, ignoring the ache in her wrists from clinging to the root. Another peal of thunder shook the heavens. She fumbled along the darkness of the trail, which twisted downward along the cliffs. While the path offered treacherous footing, at least it was a way out of the Temple of Nightmares. The wind whipped her hair into her face, stinging her eyes so much that tears mingled with the rain. Time lost all meaning as she descended, a slave to her need to escape. If more gargoyles followed, she wouldn't see them until lightning revealed their approach. Yet, the horrifying roars seemed to fade, replaced by the renewed screeching of the storm itself. Perhaps they had not pursued her beyond the cathedral's periphery, bound in some mysterious way to that forsaken ground. With labored breaths, she finally reached a lower plateau. Towering pines bent under the gale, offering some shelter from the relentless wind. Grateful for anything resembling safety, she collapsed against the trunk of one such pine, holding her side to quell a burning stitch in her ribs. In the distance, high above, the cathedral's silhouette rose stark and dark against the savage sky. Lightning continued to flare, illuminating the structure's once noble arches and towers, now in the throes of partial collapse. Here and there, winged shapes darted across the raging heavens, guardians of sorrow and wrath. Mina watched, heart-pounding, as a final enormity of thunder cracked through the sky, and in that flash, she saw multiple gargoyles folding their wings, settling onto the cathedral's parapets, as though commanded by some invisible force. The storm's center seemed to pass, leaving a trailing cacophony of rain and distant thunder. She felt the press of exhaustion in every muscle as she huddled against a pine trunk. Her soaked clothes clung to her, and each breath hissed through clenched teeth. Blood pounded in her ears. Despite her fear, her eyes were drawn to the unholy pageant above. The gargoyles, now still, loomed ominously along the rooftops. Perhaps at daybreak, they would seem nothing more than lifeless sculptures. Yet in her mind's eye, she could never again mistake them for mere stone. She knew the truth. They were awake, ensnared in some ancient vigil, awakened by the storm's unstoppable fury. At long last, her trembling subsided to a faint tremor in her fingertips. She started to make her way inland. The path twisted perilously, strewn with debris. But with each step, she placed more distance between herself and the towering edifice. The cathedral's outline soon blurred into the blackness of the cliff, only recognizable when lightning seized the night. Each massive bolt illuminated the stones, and the silent watchers perched upon its corners. As she cleared the final turn of the path, the cliffside gave way to flat moorland. The wind still shrieked through the gorse bushes, but the sense of relentless danger lessened. She allowed herself one last look back. High on the cliff, the cathedral stood like a black stain on the horizon. She could almost feel its wrathful watch upon her. Part of her yearned to flee and never speak of this place again. Another part, the part that had driven her here in the first place, might someday pull her back to that dark boundary where stone gargoyles keep their eternal vigil. And should she ever return, she understood far too well that the cathedral would still be waiting, steeped in silent malevolence and haunted by living stone. She trudged away, laboring under the weight of what she had witnessed. Without looking back again, she vanished into the storm-lashed night. Far above, thunder rolled and wings beat against the sky, a solemn promise that secrets older than faith and deeper than any ocean continued to stir within the cathedral's forsaken walls. The wind carried a final echo, faint yet distinct, like the rustle of colossal wings settling back into their perches. Then all was quiet, save for the distant roar of the sea and the scattered thunder that drifted ever farther into the blackness.